Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
On a cold and rainy night in 1983, a 10-year-old Jo-Anne Pedersen stepped into a phone booth outside a small convenience store in Chilliwack, British Columbia. Jo-Anne wasn't happy. She was having a rough night. Jo-Anne's sister and the 14-year-old cousin who was babysitting her pulled a prank that seems to have gone tragically wrong. The two older girls locked 10-year-old Jo-Anne out of the house. Rather than pleading with them, Jo-Anne walked to a nearby convenience store to call her mom and ask her to come home. Jo-Anne did reach her mom from that phone booth, and between tears asked to be picked up. But during the call, a mysterious man took over the phone briefly before the call was disconnected. When Jo-Anne's mom arrived, her daughter was nowhere to be found. And now, over 4 decades later, Jo-Anne's disappearance still haunts the people of Chilliwack. This is a case with strange phone calls, mysterious letters, a prior kidnapping, and so many more twists and turns. And tonight, Madelayne Klein and I are going to do our best to make sense of it. So let's get into it here. In this episode of Nighttime, our topic is the disappearance of then 10-year-old Jo-Anne Pedersen.
This general store is 2 blocks from Jo-Anne Pedersen's home in Better Crossing. She was last seen here at 9 o'clock on Saturday night, talking to a stranger in the telephone booth outside the general store. She had just placed a call to her mother in Chilliwack, asking that her mother come and pick her up.
That same man with her came on the phone and said, "You better get here within half an hour or I'm phoning the police." And I was there between 15 and 20 minutes, and there was no one there.
Miss Madelayne Klein, we're wearing matching sweaters. We're all in black tonight.
We are. We're like, this wasn't even planned, but we're clearly like on the same page for sure.
You know, a black hoodie is my security blanket. Is that what they call it? Like a kid who always carries their blanket around. That's me with my black hoodie. Nothing can really hurt me or make me feel bad if I have like a warm, plain black hoodie.
I don't love mine quite that much.
Oh, really?
But my security blanket would be like a security blanket.
Like a literal, okay.
Yeah.
No, for me,
I'm a
it's
blanket gal.
Okay. But a hoodie, we don't need to go on at length about this, but I just want to say, I think people should normalize like getting in bed with a hoodie on as like a kind of like a pajama thing. If you got an oversized hoodie and you get in bed and you put the hood up and lay in bed, it's amazing. I love doing that.
Only when I'm sick will I do the, also, does yours zip up or is it a pullover?
No, I'd never sleep. That's 2 separate articles of clothing. This is just a straight up hoodie, a pullover.
For my neck of the woods, these are called bunny hugs.
Bunny hugs?
Yes.
Like a pullover hoodie is a bunny hug?
And it usually has the pocket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The pouch.
The bunny hug
Okay.
in Saskatchewan.
Okay. But that's not what we're here for tonight. We're here tonight to discuss a story that if you just put these notes down, like the basics of this story on paper, I think you would have a hard time convincing people that this story is real and is not just like an urban legend or a cautionary tale made up to scare older siblings into looking after their younger sibling. Before we plan to talk about this, were you aware of the story of Jo-Anne Pedersen?
I was not. This is the first time hearing of it.
I don't know. I think this was a listener recommended story once upon a time. I covered it on Nighttime ages ago, but there's been big developments in the case. And when I originally covered this episode, I think in 2019, it was before one of the largest updates that we'll talk about tonight. And it was, I did it as like a solo narration, like just a short episode, just telling the story. But since we got into covering stuff, I thought this would be a good one to kind of dig a bit deeper in and kind of break down some of the key moments of it with you. So let's start with, well, for one, we're going to time travel back to Chilliwack, BC, the early 80s, 1983, a time when Chilliwack was much different than it is now. Chilliwack at present, we're recording this in 2025, the population is well over 100,000 people, but back in 83, it was closer to 40,000, and it was seen as like a safe family, like kind of community. It wasn't a big city, and now it has a lot of it's known for social problems. It wasn't back then. It was a different community, seen as a military community. I believe
Oh,
the majority of the town's kind of economy was based on a military base. So of course, a lot of like young families would be passing through there back in the early 80s.
I'm trying to think if 40 years, if like over doubling your population, is that like normal or is that fast?
That would definitely be fast. So
Right?
well, it would be fast unless there was a reason that it doubled. Like I could see if some new industry opened up, like some massive thing happened, and all of a sudden the population grew as a result of that. I can't find a reason why Chilliwack was able to grow its population so much. Again, over doubling in 40 years.
Yeah,
Which
40 years isn't
also
that long.
I should also say this is 1983. That doesn't sound like 40 years ago for me as an 80s kid, but I guess it was. I just double checked the math as you were talking. Like, crap. Where did the
Is
time go?
is your age now news to you?
I'm reminded every so often. But let's talk about Jo-Anne Pedersen. At the time of the story, 83 in Chilliwack, BC, she was just a 10-year-old girl, a grade 5 student at Watson Elementary. She lived in Chilliwack with her mom, Angela, her stepfather, John, and she had two older sisters. One of them we're going to be learning a lot about tonight because her older sister, Louise, 1 year older, would have been an 11-year-old, is kind of like a key player in the story. But I know we both read quite a bit about Joanne. Tell me a little bit about her life or what she would have been into back in 83.
She was just a very normal, typical 10-year-old. She liked riding her bike and singing and doing all that good stuff. I imagine growing up
Mhm.
in BC, you spend a lot of time outside. I'm just
Yeah.
speculating, but
I'm sure, but especially in the 80s, it's
that's true.
in that era, there was, just a couple channels and a lot of them didn't play children's programming. So, what else do you do in the early 80s when you're 10 years old? You're outside on your bike, in your yard, playing with the neighborhood kids, probably exploring the woods. And we know from the story that there's a mall not too far from Joanne's home. So, with some older siblings, why not go to the mall often? And that will become also a part in the story. But the 1980s, there was probably a lot less to do, but it was also a simpler time in terms of like child rearing. Uh, what Joanne's parents or Joanne's mom will do on the evening of February 19th, 1983 is something that I think through a present day lens in 2025 is not acceptable, but I think in 83 it was. The story will take place during an evening where Joanne's mom and stepfather are going to a birthday party at a Legion in Chilliwack. They decide to leave Joanne, her 11-year-old sister Louise, in the care of their 14-year-old cousin. So the three girls, 14, 11, and 10, are to look after themselves or each other until Joanne's mom and her stepfather get home later that night after the birthday party. Does that seem unusual to you?
For today, for today, yes, but like
Mhm.
even like I'm a child of the 90s and the youngest of three, and my brother was looking after my sister and I when I was like 5, 6, so he would have been
Mhm.
like 11 or 12.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I would have had the similar experiences. I have an older brother, 3 years older than me, and I'm sure when I was even younger, he
Oh
would have been
yeah.
looking after me. And I was raised by my dad, like a single father who did shift work. So there was nights where, it'd be 8 o'clock at night. My dad would be going to work and just tell my 13-year-old
Woo.
brother to look after me until the morning and get me ready for school and get me to school. So that was, I don't want to, and I say that because I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming Joanne's mom, Angela, for what is eventually going to happen here. But that's a big part of the story is that they were left alone. Nowadays, like you're a mom, would you do that? Could you imagine? I guess your daughter's so young, but could you see yourself leaving a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old?
See, my little daffodil, I just know that she is going to be perfect and not a troublemaker. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But like,
Okay.
I don't know, it makes me kind of sad that kids today probably won't experience that because like back then it was the wild wild west. Like your parents would leave you alone for like maybe in the summer all day, all night for you, and like it was carnage, and you guys would like play and fight and like do whatever. There was no cell phones. If you needed to get
Yeah,
a hold, you had to call their work.
yeah, that's another thing, and that will become a part in this story as well. Is it's one thing to leave your kids home and in the care of your 14-year-old cousin, their 14-year-old cousin, but without cell phones and that kind of technology, it's not like you're in constant contact.
No.
It's a whole different scene.
But also something I found kind of not funny, but like just kind of strange to me about this story is that the girls went out. When we were left alone, it was like you don't leave. You don't even open the door for anyone. Like you don't leave the house.
Yeah. So let's get into that, their decision to leave. So Joanne's mom and stepfather, they're off at the Chilliwack Legion at a birthday party, leaving the three girls home alone, aged 10, 11, and 14. It was, again, this is February 19th. It was colder this time of year, and it happened to be pouring rain, crappy weather that day. I'm guessing there was just not much to do in the house. So the way they decided to spend their day was to walk to the mall in that community. From what I've been able to tell, it was about a 15-minute walk from their home to the mall. They decided to go to the mall and basically spend the day there. They got there, and I believe they ended up spending over 4 hours in the mall, just hanging around doing their stuff. But again, that's an 80s thing. There was probably a great arcade. There was probably a great food court to just sit and like chat in.
That's
they probably, where there was, the mall played the part that social media does for some people in terms of the socializing back then. I remember going to the mall and just hanging around and seeing all my friends from school, and we talk and chill, and like social things were happening. So I'm guessing that was probably a bit of the way they were spending their day.
Oh, it had to have been. It's like right now, 4 hours at the shopping mall is like my personal nightmare. But
Really? I love a good mall hangout, as long as it's got a good coffee shop and some freaks to watch.
I don't know. I'm from Regina. They're all, there's a bunch of stabby gang kids at our malls.
Okay. So the trio of girls, they spend the day at the mall, but when the sun sets and the mall is probably beginning to wind down, they make their walk home. They begin their walk home. Again, keeping in mind, the sun is setting, it's getting dark out, it's chilly, and it's pouring rain. Not a good walk home. And a theme of what we've talked about so far is this idea of like kind of like killing time and finding ways to have fun when there's not a lot going on. And as someone with an older sibling, what I know older siblings do when they're bored is they pick at their younger sibling. During this walk home, 10-year-old Jo-Anne Pedersen and her 11-year-old sister, Louise, seem to get in what's described as a petty fight. I'm guessing it was probably an argument over something so mundane and innocuous, but it's what sets this whole thing in motion.
As someone with an older sister, I know exactly the type of argument that they had. I feel like I was there.
I'm curious if this is shocking to you, but what ends up happening is the two older girls, they're older and faster, so they run ahead, race to the house, leaving Joanne in their dust. And when they get to the house, I guess you can call it a prank, they run in, slam the door, and lock the door, and leave Joanne outside in the rain. Probably to laugh at her through the window is what I'm thinking.
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to think. Like, my sister never did anything like that to me, thank God. But she probably knew that if she did, like, our parents would have just lost it. Like, yeah.
My brother would totally have done something like this, and my parents would have lost it, but then they would have forgotten about it, and he'd do something like this again. But my brother I was what was I called? Like the newspaper delivery boy for my neighborhood. So I always had cash, and my brother always stole my cash. I remember he took a bunch of my cash and ran to his bedroom, which was in the basement. But he had this whole thing planned, and what he did was he put shaving cream on the door handle. before he did. So he grabbed my money, ran downstairs, and slammed the door to the basement so that I would like run and grab the door to get down there, and I would get shaving cream on my hand. Like that's just like an example of like a stupid prank he did. He also
Premeditated too.
Oh yeah, I should be charged. He also made me oatmeal. And I have such a strong memory of this. I was probably 7 years old, and I remember my brother being like, "Do you want some breakfast? I'll make you oatmeal." My dad was probably off at work or something, and I was like, "Yeah, like wow, this is the first nice thing you've ever done to me for me." And he made me oatmeal, and then I remember he sat it in front of me. I was probably sitting there with my legs crossed on the floor watching GI Joe, and I took my first scoop of the oatmeal with a spoon and put it in my mouth and bit down on a whole bunch of pennies. Like buried under the oatmeal. But,
that's so gross. And that's so mean.
it is mean. All that to say, I can understand what should be a harmless prank between siblings. I'm sure your sister or your brother did this kind of nonsense to you as well, like mundane little things like that.
But like, I feel like it would have been short-lived. Like, yeah, haha, lock me out for a few minutes, but then like, let me in.
Yeah, that's the locking out's a little different. We don't know how long that Joanne was outside, either banging on the door or whatever, but it seems like she quickly kind of lost interest and thought, rather than fighting with my sister to try to get in the house, I'm going to go to the convenience store that's like a block away from the house, and I'm going to call mom at the Legion and get mom to, I don't know, call the house and tell them to let me in or come home and get them in trouble. So Joanne walked from her home after being locked out again at night, pouring rain, and she walks to a nearby convenience store called the Penny Pincher. She walks into the store and she approaches the clerk, a woman named Helen Fong. And Helen Fong is the first person she turns to for help in this whole saga. I'll play you a clip in which Helen Fong describes Joanne coming into the store that night.
She came in, she was soaked and she was crying, and I asked her what's the matter, and she said I was locked out. So I said, how come you don't have any key? She said, I don't have key. Can I borrow your phone? I said, yes. Then I handed her the phone, and she said, gee, I don't know the number. I said, how come you don't know your home's phone number? She said, my mom's downtown Chilliwack in the Legion somewhere. And I said, well, if you don't know the number, well, you go outside and call the operator and ask for the phone, and then she left.
So far during our talk, I feel like we've been a little light in terms of the conversation, but I think when you hear this moment, I'm really feeling bad about this little girl who has to go into the store and ask to use the phone, doesn't know her mother's number.
Like she's crying, and
yeah, that breaks my heart. Again, I don't want to blame people in something that, with hindsight being 2020, I'm sure everyone involved in this story would have done something different. But for Helen Fong to say, go outside and call the operator, does that decision surprise you?
Well, yeah, why couldn't she just call the operator from her phone?
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine the store was busy or something and she wasn't able to stop what she was doing. But I just feel like, even if I'm working as a store clerk or at a gas station or coffee shop or something, and I have a lineup of adults, regardless of that lineup, if this little 10-year-old comes in cold and shivering, crying, asking to call her mom, I can't imagine being like, there's a payphone open in the parking lot, press 0 and the operator will come and patch you through. I just feel like I'd be like everybody else, like obviously I have to deal with this right now.
Yeah, you'd think, but yeah, I don't know. The 80s were different.
Maybe, but what happens is, as Helen Fong suggests, Jo-Anne Pedersen goes outside. She goes into a little payphone, which is just in the parking lot, basically, of this Penny Pincher's convenience store. She picks up the phone and we can only assume, calls the operator and says, I'm trying to reach the Chilliwack Legion to talk to my mom. The operator connects them, so the phone rings at the Legion. I imagine it's a birthday party, so there's probably a loud room where someone picks up the phone and hears Joanne probably crying, saying, I want to talk to my mom, Angela. Someone shouts for Angela, and she comes and picks up the phone, and Angela has a conversation with her daughter, Joanne. And just like Helen Fong, Joanne spoke to Global News about it. So rather than me telling you what happened in that call, I'm going to play it for you. And this is really going to open up a lot of conversation. But here's Joanne's mom, Angela, telling Global News about the phone call.
She phoned and said, come and pick me up. My husband had answered the phone and talked to her, and everything seemed all right. She didn't mention this fellow or anything being there. She said, well, could you just come pick me up? And John said, yes, we'll be right there. And he said, do you want to talk to your mom for a minute? And I said, yes. And I went to go on the phone, and it was just click, click, click on the phone. And
well, did a man come on the phone at one point?
Yes, that same man with her came on the phone and said, you better get here within half an hour or I'm phoning the police. And I was there between 15 and 20 minutes. When I went to talk to Joanne on the phone, she wasn't there, and I phoned back right away, and there was no one there.
So there's lots to explain there. So first of all, this man who gets brought up is a key player in this whole story. Is Joanne will end up being last seen talking to a man at the phone booth. So it's whoever this man is, it's obviously the man who gets on the phone for a period of time and says to Joanne's mom, get here in 15 minutes or whatever it is, or I'm calling the cops. But and Joanne's mom also mentions John. John is her stepfather. So when Joanne calls the Legion, she's speaking to her stepfather as well as her mom. But when the man at the phone booth gets on the phone, it's to say that to Joanne's mom, Angela. But this is pretty disturbing.
It's so unsettling. Like, her mom sounds so calm. I realize we're not talking to her in the moment, but like, if I were to hear a strange man on the other side of my daughter, I know she's using a payphone at some random gas station, and this guy's telling me to get there or he's calling the police. It doesn't really matter what he says. Some strange man is with my 10-year-old. Yeah,
that's something. Yeah, I'd be flipping out, and she does flip out because she mentions it in that brief interview on the news. There is when she's talking to Joanne, the phone hangs up. And then she calls back. Because a payphone back then, you used to be able to call them. And she's calling the payphone back from the Legion, and there's no answer. So while she's on the line with Joanne, this man says, get here in 15 minutes or I'm calling the cops. The phone hangs up. Then she's calling back, and there's no answer. Angela and her partner, John, drive to the penny pincher. But by the time they arrive, which they say is about 20 minutes later, she is not there. And as far as how she left, we'll go back to Helen Fong, the store clerk. One of the questions that she was asked on Global News is, "Did you see her leave?" And I just thought this is worth including.
Did you see how she left the store?
No, we were busy, we keep on, customer coming in, so we didn't pay any attention.
So you don't know what happened?
No.
I think that maybe also shines a light on why Joanne was asked to go outside and call the operator to deal with this. It seems like Helen was, it was a busy store and she was just trying to keep things rolling despite a crying 10-year-old girl coming in the store.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, she is using the phone. You can help customers while this 10-year-old is on the phone. What's the problem?
I think anyone would understand, right? Like, we're recording this over 40 years after this event happens. I have a feeling, and the title of this episode is The Disappearance of Jo-Anne Pedersen. I have a feeling Helen Wong over the last 40 years has lived with some serious guilt.
I think a few people in this story have lived with tremendous guilt. And she's one of them for sure.
Before we get into where we're at now, I think it's clear what happens is Joanne's mom and stepfather show up at the penny pincher store. Joanne is not there. Shortly after, the missing persons report is filed and the search begins. Let's have a short break. When we get back, we'll follow along with the early days of the search, and then we will talk about the many bizarre twists and turns that are about to play out. Joanne is last seen the evening of February 19th. The next day is when the search really begins the next morning. And it's, a 10-year-old girl goes missing in a small town in BC. It's an all hands on deck search. Search and rescue, police, civilians, dogs, helicopters. Everybody is out looking all around the penny pincher store and for, a slowly growing grid beyond that for Joanne. And there is literally nothing. There is not one drop of her or evidence found. And I should also say, although this is February in BC, there was not snow on the ground when this happened. So it would have been a good time to search. There was no leaves on the trees to prevent you from seeing the ground. This would have been a thorough search and nothing.
This kind of rubs me the wrong way. So a child goes missing on the evening of February 19th, and we wait until morning to start looking.
Mm-hmm.
And why, like you said, hindsight's 2020, but why wouldn't they consider this a kidnapping right away?
Yeah, just because of the man?
Yeah. And I don't know what this specific area of Chilliwack looks like, if it's dense or whatever, but I don't know why they would wait so long for to start.
Yeah, I would just think a few things. I think for one, to just organize, set up a base, get the search and rescue people together and get things out. That's going to take a couple hours anyway, I bet, especially in the early 80s. Also, they would need to check the obvious places. Like they would probably check her friends' houses, other family members, and just make sure she didn't go somewhere, I guess. I feel like, and I'm not defending their decision or not defending that whole, you need to wait 24 hours before we can look for someone. But I think in the case of a 10-year-old who is last seen in a phone booth with a strange man and the call is disconnected at night outside of a convenience store, that doesn't sound good.
Well, and also, he said to her mother, "Be here in half an hour or I'm calling the cops." And she showed up in 15 to 20 minutes and they were gone. So he had he wasn't about to wait around.
Yeah, but we'll talk more about his intent. But to say, "Get here or I'm calling the cops," that doesn't seem like a threatening. Like if he wanted to scoop this girl up and kidnap her, why would he say that? Why wouldn't he just say, "It's okay, I'm going to drive her. I'll drive her there, or I'll sit with her until you get here. How long will you be?" Okay, 20 minutes? All right. I feel like forever when I've heard about the story, I've thought, since the beginning of hearing and reading about the story, I thought it's super sketchy that she's in a phone booth with this strange man, but it seems like what the strange man is doing is saying, "Get here right away or I'm going to call the cops," which is what I think a reasonable person would do. If I was in that situation and there's this little girl alone at night crying in the rain and she's on the phone with her mom, I'd probably, and I see her near a phone booth, I could see myself saying, "Is everything okay? Do you need anything?" And she'd say, "I'm on the phone with my mom." I could see me picking up the phone and being like, "Are you out of your mind? Get here right away. There's a little, your daughter's here in the rain at night. What the hell?"
Yeah, I don't know. It's just too weird. Why would he say that? And then, I don't know. There's just too many questions and not enough answers.
Yeah. And it is about, and that man in the phone booth is one thing, but there's a whole bunch of other bizarre stuff surrounding this case in the search for Joanne. I will say, though, that the actual ground search was said to be thorough, found no evidence, and was eventually called off, I think, within days, if not weeks, because it went nowhere. But the story continued to progress with odd things. So the first thing we need to talk about is someone who was suspected from the very beginning is Joanne's father. Now, we mentioned that Joanne's mom and her boyfriend, Joanne's stepfather, were together at the Legion. But Joanne's father, his name is Leo Pedersen. His story is pretty bizarre. There was a bitter custody battle fought between Joanne's mom and dad over who would look after her. Joanne's father, Leo, felt that Joanne's mom was not a fit parent, and he wanted custody of his daughter for, according to him, to protect her and keep her, and keep her safe. But the way he went about trying to accomplish that was less than appropriate.
That's an understatement. He took Joanne and her sisters to the States.
And tried to change their names.
He tried to change their names. I thought he just tried to change his name.
He used, I think he used different names for everybody. This was, I think, like 2 years before her disappearance. He basically kidnapped the kids and fled to the States. Ended up getting busted, and everybody came back. But here's another weird thing. You know, you hear that he did that, and you're like, oh God, like obviously he did this. But Leo actually in the news clip that I played of Helen Fong and Joanne's mom, Leo was there as well, and he went on the news and he had no problem with the Global Reporter saying, like, is it true that you like kidnapped her 2 years before?
And he was like, yeah, I did that.
Leo Pedersen has come from Grand Forks. He has not seen his daughter since a bitter custody dispute erupted.
I tried to search my mind and my memories of anything but there's nothing that I can do to help.
Isn't it true, sir, that you took your children 3.5 years ago to the United States to live and changed your name so that you wouldn't be detected?
That is correct, yes, and that was at that time also because of my concern for the children. They were very unhappy about the situation then. I attempted to get legal custody at the time, but the time involved and the money involved, I was informed by my lawyer, was prohibitive.
You know, I respect the honesty, truly.
Yeah, my lawyer said it would cost a lot of money and take time, so I figured why not just take them and flee to the United States?
It's like that was the best case scenario at the time.
Yeah, that is.
I thought that, should I not have done that?
It's pretty wild to hear it, but he had to answer to that, and he didn't seem to shy away from telling that reporter what happened. That's a pretty bizarre clip to see in a missing child's news report, though. Like, you would think it'd be damning, but Leo apparently he wasn't even in the city when Joanne disappeared. He's showing up to join in the search, and that's why he appeared on the news several days after. So they say his alibi is rock solid, and he's not expected to be involved in whatever happened with her. But I would want to take a good look at him, just given that background.
And I don't know, aren't parents always like, not the number one suspect, but like they're always thoroughly looked into? Why wouldn't he take both of his daughters, though? Mm-hmm.
And how would he know she's at, like, if he was involved, how would he know she would be at the penny pinchers in the phone booth at, or this random night where she shouldn't even be there? Like, I think,
right.
He would be a likely suspect if she was like scooped away from her bed late at night and her window was, smashed or something. But this, to me, her disappearance from a phone booth, I'm looking for the man who was in the phone booth with her, or any just kind of freak who was just passing by that may have had the opportunity to see like this girl alone crying and swooped in or something.
If a crime or foul play took place, it was a total, what word am I looking for here? Like a crime of opportunity. Someone thought fast and was like, yep, you.
Yeah. So we have the custody battle and this whole thing that's strange. But we also have the first of 3 mysterious communications we're going to talk about. This is a mysterious phone call that was made 3 weeks after her disappearance to her grandmother. Do you want to talk us through this one?
Oh, this is like the entire story is terrible, but this part really like tore at my heart.
This is a nightmare. What you're going to describe here,
right? And it just like solidifies that it was a kidnapping, because if it was anything else, like, getting lost in the wilderness, this probably wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. So yeah, about 3 weeks later on March 5th, Joanne's grandmother, Mary Riley, received a random phone call. And this, of course, was before the days of caller ID. Mm-hmm. She picked up the phone and a man's voice asked her to confirm the phone number. So he said, yeah, is this whatever, says the phone number. And she said, yes. And he said, listen to this. And then all she could hear was the sound of a child crying.
And then the phone disconnects.
And then he hung up.
Mm-hmm. So it's like my thought, Joanne's disappearance would have been in the news at this time, and it was a high-profile disappearance from the very beginning because it was a 10-year-old girl. So I could see some kind of gremlin trolling her family like that. But this is different because Joanne's grandmother, she had a different last name than Joanne. Her phone number was not in a phone book; it was unlisted. The only people that really knew Joanne's grandmother's phone number were close family, including Joanne. So that makes it kind of more possible that someone got her number from, like, if it was a kidnapping or something. They've never been able to track this call or trace this call, whatever the right word is for it. There was no other calls made. It was just this one call 4 weeks later. But that has left it. One comment made to the media when this call became public, this is from one of the main investigators for the case, is they said, "There's no doubt in my mind that it was the child. I'm convinced she's alive." That was said by a Sergeant David Ayers to the media. So if you hear the main detective saying that, it's like, if anyone knows, it should be him.
We'd like to hope.
At this point, you have that call. The ground search has gone cold and has been called off at this point. We'll go forward to 2008, the 25th anniversary of Joanne's disappearance. And sadly, over that 25 years, there has been little to nothing in terms of developments. But in 2008, on the 25th anniversary, Crime Stoppers will publicize the case by producing and releasing a reenactment. And it was like a 1.5 minute long video that tells the story of Joanne's disappearance and asks for anyone with information on her disappearance or the man in the phone booth with her to come forward and call Crime Stoppers and, give their information. And they would use the 25th anniversary as, you've seen the news do this, that they'll choose an anniversary for a case and use that as the time to do like kind of a media push on it. So Crime Stoppers did that, and in this case, with Jo-Anne Pedersen's case, it really seemed to work because shortly after the Crime Stoppers reenactment aired, there was a whole bunch of interest in the case, and that's when the first anonymous letter shows up at the local police department. There has been pretty significant revelations over the last several years, and in part they relate to these anonymous letters. The first one, we'll just call it the 2008 letter, is very little was released publicly about what this letter contained, but the police did talk about it with the media and said that it said enough to lead them to believe that the letter writer was in fact a witness to whatever happened and was likely the man seen with Joanne in the phone booth. But they didn't go beyond that, other than to say they believe it's him or likely him, but they definitely think it's someone who was there. And they asked publicly for whoever wrote this letter to us, we want to talk to you and learn more. What does that tell you?
I don't know. In 2008, the police station, the RCMP detachment didn't have cameras.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's because it wasn't mailed. It was a letter dropped off by someone at the police station, and they had to go on, like the letter, whatever it said, it was so compelling that they had to reveal this on the news and be like, whoever did this, contact us again. We have questions and we want to learn more.
Well, and didn't they release just like a little tiny snippet of it so that someone maybe could recognize the handwriting?
I believe they released a tiny snippet of a letter that showed up several years later in 2011.
Oh, that's the later one.
The second letter showed up, which basically same story, hand delivered to the RCMP station in Chilliwack, which the police didn't say what this letter contained, but other than to say it was stuff that you would have need to be a witness to know about. So they believe that whoever wrote it was a witness. They released just like a couple lines of text in the news to see if anyone would recognize the handwriting. And again, they offered a plea, like, whoever you are that did this, contact us because we want your help.
That's just so strange.
It is shocking.
Like that many years later. If you're innocent, why didn't you come forward earlier? with information. And if it's, I don't know, if it's weighing that heavy on you that you have to 25, 30 years later drop an anonymous letter off.
And it seems to be like that both, if not, that the 2008 letter, if not both of them, was from the man in the phone booth, because another statement that the police made during this time is that the letters led them to believe that the man was in fact trying to help Joanne and not trying to harm her. So I feel like, without seeing the letter and reading it, I have a feeling it's letters from the man in the phone booth saying, like, this is what happened. I just saw this little girl and I picked up the phone and I drove off, and, telling his story of what happened is what I'm expecting it is. But for the police to go on the news and say, like, we think he was trying to help, maybe that was a way to make it more comfortable for the man from the phone booth to, come into the police station.
Maybe.
You're not a suspect. We just want to, what did you see? And that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. I'm just not convinced that he was just trying to help her.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
So we covered the story around the disappearance in 1983. We jumped forward to the 2008-2011 letters. We're going to again jump forward now to 2023, the 40th anniversary, the 40th anniversary of Joanne's disappearance. They do it again, like so often on an anniversary, especially on like the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. That's when the news will refresh a case and remind everyone that this sort of thing happened. On the 40th anniversary, back in 2023, the police in Chilliwack made what to me was a pretty shocking statement when they shared that they have identified and ruled out the man in the phone booth as being involved. 40 years later.
In 2011, an anonymous letter hand-delivered to Chilliwack RCMP.
There's certain details, I guess, in the letter that only this person would know.
Police revealed the man seen in the phone booth with Pedersen wrote them an anonymous letter in 2008. Now, RCMP say they have identified the phone booth man and ruled him out as a suspect, but will not be sharing his name.
And how did you rule that out? I want details, and I want them now.
And that's another part of this, is not only are they not telling how they ruled it out, they're not giving this person's identity. They don't want people to know his name. They haven't said anything about this guy other than we've identified him and he's not a suspect. We're not releasing his name, nothing.
Well, maybe he's dead. I wonder if he's dead.
But how could you, if he was, why protect his identity? How could you rule him out? How could you identify him? I believe it was the letters that in 2008 and 2011 that led them to this man. But
I don't know.
Maybe could they have we don't know, I'm just guessing, but they could have used new investigative means like DNA and stuff on these letters. I'm sure that would have been big evidence when those letters came in. They would have been set aside. So you never know with the advancements of DNA, maybe they were able to identify him through that. But to say we don't believe he's to be a suspect, that's wild. That would imply a conversation.
Yeah. It's just so strange, because what else would have happened to her? She didn't wander off because they would have found something. They would have found her boot or her jacket, or the dogs would have picked up some sort of scent. Mm-hmm. Her mom wasn't that far behind. How far could she possibly get in 20 minutes if she just scampered off?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And she would be seen. There would be witnesses. If you see a random adult walking down the street, that's one thing. But at night, if there's a girl alone in the rain, a 10-year-old girl, everybody who drives by is going to notice that.
But also remember, the store was super busy. No one saw her leave with someone or walk a direction. No one saw anything, despite how busy this store was.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to this man in the phone booth, he said to Joanne's mom, if you're not here in 15 minutes, I'm calling the police. that would also imply he's going to sit there with her, or
Yes.
maybe have her just stand at the phone booth, or have her in his vehicle with him or something while they wait for 15 minutes. What did he just decide, like, I said that to her, but I didn't stick around. I just left. I was just calling her bluff.
Right. And then someone else came and kidnapped her? Like, it's...
Yeah.
I know Stranger Things, but...
But with this guy, the phone booth guy. So if that's his story, so he says to Joanne's mom, if you're not here in 15 minutes, I'm calling the cops. For whatever reason, he doesn't want to talk to the police for whatever it is, 30 or 40 years. He finally comes out of hiding. He talks to the police, and they say, like, so you said that, what happened? If he's like, I just left. So you said that, and you just left, and then you didn't contact us for 40 years. Like, guilty, Your Honor.
Right?
It has to be. There's no other explanation. It doesn't make sense. Or
it's a little fishy.
Yeah. I can't possibly put, like, I like to try to think about what someone did and try to imagine what would have to happen to make me do that. I cannot possibly imagine handling it in that way.
Right. Well, and just remember the phone call to Joanne's grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
There was some malicious behavior going on.
It sounds like
that little girl was kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, who knows? Like Stranger Things, what if she's still around? The 10-year-old brain is, like, the human brain in general is very fragile, but like a 10-year-old, there's quite a few kidnapping cases where, they're found 20, 30 years later, and, they, like, in hindsight, they could have escaped years ago, but they just they get, I don't know if it's like a Stockholm syndrome thing, or I don't know. There's a few cases that stick out in my mind that are just bizarre.
Yeah, I would like to think, or I hope for the best in this case, and that probably is the best outcome, is that she forgets who she was, or has extreme Stockholm syndrome and is now, like, taken on this new life. But I don't think that's likely.
She'd be like almost 52 now.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible.
But then how was she never found?
I think I think it's clear that this is a kidnapping, and even though the police said this man in the phone booth is ruled out as a suspect, I feel like I won't believe that unless I ruled him out myself, because, like, I want to be in the room for how they did that, because to me it doesn't make any sense that he's not involved.
Well, and yet, as we learned earlier, back in 1983, it was very easy to get over the border with a child that you weren't supposed to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
She, and they didn't really even start looking until the next morning. So, 10 hours is a good head start. Mm-hmm. She could have been provinces away.
Yeah. And I hate to just bring it up over and over again, but if this guy said he was going to stay there for 15 minutes, and if she doesn't show up, call the cops, why would he not follow through on that? Who in the...
Right.
It was like the initial description of this guy was that he was thought to be like 20 to 30 years old. He would be old enough to know, like, I'm not going to just leave this kid there. Why not just stay there? I feel like this guy, and the fact that he hid out or whatever, maybe he was worried about being accused, or he had a warrant and he didn't want to be arrested or something. I still feel like there's no reason to wait all this time, drop off these sketchy notes at the police station. It takes 40 years to be identified. There's no reasonable explanation for that. And why aren't the police telling people who he is?
Yeah, I mean, if he's not a suspect, and if he's cleared, well, I guess the jury of the townspeople probably wouldn't, just like you and I, they probably wouldn't take too well to that.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, no, something doesn't sound right here.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it wouldn't be, maybe it's because they can't release it. If he's not a suspect, he's not being charged in anything. Why? Now I'm just thinking aloud, or I'm just realizing this now. Why would the police release it? That would be, I guess, hey, they would never do that. Yeah, it would be up to him.
Okay, so and that's fine, but you have to tell us how you ruled him out.
At least that, like the public.
Like I
deserves
said,
to
we
know.
want details and we want them now.
Mhm. But maybe, yeah, I don't know. And would they, if they weren't able to rule him out, why would they say that? Like maybe if unless he is ruled out, they would just say, we've received information, but it hasn't progressed the investigation. Like to say they ruled him out would imply like, yeah, it's not him. 100%. We're not even looking there anymore.
And it's like, how do you know?
Mhm.
Tell us.
All this to say, so we're not going to solve this case. Jo-Anne Pedersen is missing. There is no sign of her, despite all this strange stuff related to her story. I want to just ask you: can you imagine what her sister's going through?
Oh my God!
Mhm.
Like to this day, you just know that she feels tremendous guilt. Like that's not something you would ever get over, and like it wasn't supposed to happen that way.
No, it's just a mean prank, senseless, stupid. You do things like this a million times when you're that age, but to have it like end in like the most tragic way, and you have to live with that and just watch the years fly by, being like, this is all started because of this stupid prank that we pulled that was pointless and mean. Like there are little things that you've done when you were younger that you don't even remember, but if it pops in your head, you're like, oh man, I was such a dummy. This should have been one of those things. Maybe maybe not even like just a forgotten thing. She's outside for a minute, she bangs on the door. Then when you realize she's crying, you're like, oh crap, like that went way too far. If she tells mom, we're screwed. Like that it should have been there. But Jo-Anne instead probably just not wanting to give in or deal with her sister's like, I'm just going to go to the store and call mom. And that decision,
I wish, like, even if like she should have gone to a neighbor's house. Although I don't know, what if there was immediate neighbors, maybe they were at the birthday party. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
the amount of
just
the amount of decisions. So Jo-Anne's mom and stepdad's decision to leave the three kids together, the older sister and cousin's decision to run ahead and lock her out, Helen Fong's decision to tell her to go outside and call the operator. The man, if in the phone booth with her, if he isn't involved, his decision to not wait until the mom shows up or follow through and actually call the police and wait until they respond. All these things together, it took so much. I'll say every one of them are bad decisions, and in hindsight, I'm proven right.
Absolutely. It's just, I guess, would you call that happenstance? Like it's just a terrible series of events that led to the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody could have, imagined it. Her sister and her cousin, that's the last thing they thought would happen.
Yeah. Well, it's the story, like this whole case comes across as like a well-written cautionary tale. And it doesn't seem real. It seems like something you would like a urban legend that you would use to scare your 14-year-old into looking after your 10-year-old and very closely,
I feel like this is one of those cases where there has to be more information that's just not public knowledge. There has to be something more.
If they in fact found the man from the phone booth and absolutely and genuinely ruled him out as a suspect, I don't see this case ever getting solved. Because I have no idea. Like I can usually think of a few different scenarios and be like, it could be it. But I think in her case, it's either she walked off mad at her sisters and waiting for her mom and I don't know, fell and injured herself and died or something somewhere. She would have been found clearly if it was some kind of accidental thing like that. She's a 10-year-old girl, so this isn't one of those stories where you can say like maybe she fled and she's living her life under a new identity. That's not the case. I think it's clear someone scooped her up, and if it wasn't the guy at the phone booth, like did two random men go up to the little girl in the phone booth that night?
Or were they like working together and the one's just really good at lying? Who knows?
It's a dark story.
But like, wouldn't that be something if, just was like, you know what? I'm 52. I'm gonna come forward and, tell them that I'm alive and well and was kidnapped many years ago.
I don't think there's a snowflake's chance in hell that that's what's happening, that she's out there living. I think whoever scooped up a little girl from a convenience store in the 80s in Chilliwack, I think whatever they had planned, I don't even want to think about it, but I don't think she's still around.
Well, then that begs the question, how long did they keep her? Because she was still alive 3 weeks later, I think.
And I guess we didn't really talk about how believable that is, the phone call to the grandmother. It's if that is real and that's exactly what happened, that is so cruel.
Yeah.
But I would have think there would have been so much stress and trauma and craziness going on that I wonder if it could have been like a legitimate wrong number and a misunderstanding. But what has come out in the media is that the grandmother said the phone call was from a man's voice. He repeated her phone number. When she did, he said, "Listen to this," the girl crying, and then it hung up. If that is what happened, that really changes the story. I just wish there was a way that was recorded so you can hear it and hear like, oh, okay, that's not a misunderstanding.
Right. But what I'm thinking is, kids don't get enough credit. Maybe she knew that, her grandmother's phone number was unlisted. He asked for her phone number and was like, well, my phone number's listed. So I want them to know that this is me and not anyone else. So she gave him her grandmother's phone number instead and was like, yes, like this is something only I would know.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, I guess that's possible.
I don't know. I'm grasping at straws.
Well, so kidnapper takes this little girl. What does kidnapper have to gain by even allowing this phone call to happen? I guess just sick, twisted.
Right.
Pleasure.
People are weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of the worst cases. This is so traumatized, just so horrific.
It's like you said before, it's like something out of a movie or like a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm. That's what it sounds like.
Tale.
That's what it sounds like. Or if you had it in a movie, like if you made a movie and this was the plot, just be like, oh, come on, they locked her out. And, it just seems so cliche or something, but this is what happened.
It's like a textbook kidnapping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that we are unable to solve, but we will continue to try, Madelayne, because we got a whole bunch of other cases on deck that we're going to get into. And I think next we should get into something recent. A case is just playing out in Halifax involving the stabbing of a 6-year-old committed by a 19-year-old. And this just happened yesterday. We're recording this right now on the 24th of February. This event just happened yesterday. And I have young kids myself. It happened in an area of Halifax that I spend a lot of time in. So I've been reading a ton about this case. So I think that'll be our next one, is trying to do our best to understand what we know about what happened in Halifax with that stabbing.
I'm not looking forward, but I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. And of course, details are super limited right now, but just from what we know right now, there's just such a striking resemblance to the Greyhound incident in Winnipeg in 2008. Mm-hmm. It's just, it reminded me of it. So, but
we'll get into that. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. If anyone listening has any thoughts, theories, or opinions on the case, we'd love to hear them. As well, if there's any part of the story we missed or anything we got wrong, we'd love to hear about that as well. You can reach us at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. Now, with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I want to give some thanks. First, a big thanks to Madelayne for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A big shout out to Monty Datta, who contributes the music for this series, and LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thanks goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be impossible. On the topic of support, I want to specifically call out to the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Cindy, Alyssa, and Peterborough Pat, we appreciate you. For anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can do it in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money will fund the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you access to those episodes 2 days early, give them to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of Nighttime episodes. If you're interested, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know why they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. And until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.